The rain in Seattle didn't drum. It whispered, pacing out its steps across puddles and windowsills, lending the city the look of a dream where every event seemed foretold. Emery Hart wrung the water from her coat collar, gathered her hair into a careless bun, and placed her palms on the cold railing of the Victorian house's porch. The house had seen more than one generation: gray wood, carved facade, windows that reflected not just lamps, but someone's old, urgent promises. In the evening, it smelled of damp wood, oversteeped tea, and something that could only be called an anticipated secret. She stood on the threshold, not just of the house, but of a decisive moment in her life. Her bag was heavy with the weight of a notebook, and in her chest, what they called a heart was pounding loudly. But tonight it sounded more like a warning. Emery hadn't come to ask. She had come to take an exam she had set for herself years ago, to test how firmly she still held the last thread of control. And if that control had weakened, someone else needed to realize it faster than the late alarm could destroy everything. The door opened instantly, as if someone inside had been waiting for that very sound. Vivian Rose stood in the doorway, lit by the neon glow of a street lamp, and seemed no older than her methods. Elegant, damp from the rain, with that self-assured grace rarely found in people accustomed to living by rules. Her eyes, calm and attentive, met Emery's not with a question, but with a statement. She knew. "You've arrived right on time," Vivian said. Her voice was low, almost rustling. There was no haste in it, only the habit of speaking as if every word already carried weight in the future. Emery smiled dryly, resisting the urge to say something foolish. She had always been irritated by how quickly others' assumptions became fact. Today, she was ready to surrender the last word in her argument with fate. "Did you invite me?" she asked, closing the door behind her and feeling the room's warmth embrace her, but not swallow her. The warmth wasn't just physical. It had a shade of attention directed at the core. Vivian knew how to look at people as if she had known them for a long time, and that knowledge made her dangerous. "I knew you would come," Vivian replied, "and I knew you would bring the rain with you." In the hallway hung mirrors and old frames. In their reflections, Emery saw herself not as a simple woman, but as something with boundaries and cracks. She took off her coat, leaned on a chair, and felt her strength. Those little surges she used to dismiss as fatigue now tightened in anticipation. Vivian didn't come closer. She let the distance keep its meaning. "You look tired," Vivian said, but her attention wasn't on the tiredness, but on the emotion hidden behind it. Or maybe not tired, just tense. Emery stepped into the room, and the air changed. It grew thicker, as if the walls absorbed sound and gave it back in a louder register. On the desk lay a small set of objects: a cup, a stack of paper, an old locket. None of it spoke directly of ritual, but together it formed a context. Here, they worked with things that couldn't be called ordinary. "You can't handle this alone," Vivian stated without preamble. It wasn't an accusation or a request. It was a fact that demanded a reaction. Emery felt the old gears of doubt grind inside her. What if I can't? What if everything changes forever? "It's true," Emery admitted, though her voice hid an attempt to sound calm. The truth never made things easier. The truth, as a rule, demanded a decision. "But how does it work?" she asked, not backing away from the point. Her tongue was used to skirting corners. Today, it cut straight through the fabric of the question. Vivian sighed and seated Emery by the window, from which a narrow street was visible. The city seemed distant. Only the rain reminded her that life went on beyond the threshold. Vivian began to explain not in the language of a scholar, but in the language of someone used to explaining things that couldn't always be measured. "Your power resonates with people," she said. "It's not just a reaction to what's inside you. It's a mirror, and those around you become part of that mirror. Strong emotions amplify it. Distrust, fear, and desire all act as catalysts." Emery listened and felt each phrase settle on her like another button on an already tight coat. In the past, she had called it loneliness. Vivian called it vulnerability to an external field. The names changed, but the essence remained the same. If the wrong people were nearby, the consequences would be costly. "So I need support," Emery said. The words sounded banal, but in her mouth, it took on weight. This wasn't a request to reveal intimacies. It was a legal act, An acknowledgement that power required a contract. Not just support, Vivian corrected. The people who are with you must know that they become part of the equation. They're not just present. They change, and you change through them. A pause hung in the room. It wasn't so much Emery felt her heart begin to beat in a new way, not from fear of the meeting alone, but from the knowledge that her personal space would be measured by others' standards. Marcus, the name that meant home, coffee, quiet Saturdays, and clumsy love now seemed like a distant object from another dimension. She remembered how he would tuck her hair under her perfume before bed, how he left notes, little gates of care that used to soothe her. Now, any gesture from Marcus could become a spark. Vivian laid out objects on the table, a stone with a matte sheen, a small metal frame with an intricate pattern, and a photograph with a neat address written on the back. None of it seemed random. The ritual, if it could be called that, was designed like a legal contract. Words, objects, spatial anchors. We're creating a contour, Vivian explained. The contour isn't protection. It's a point around which interaction becomes predictable. When you enter the contour, your power tunes to the frequency of those present. If they're ready to receive, everything goes to work. If not, there will be noise. Noise later. Now, silence, charged with anticipation. A distant chime. Emery listened and heard footsteps on the sidewalk that didn't match the steps in her head. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Marcus. Be there in 20. Footsteps at the door, heavy, confident. The doorbell rang like a signal in a match, and Emery went to open it. Marcus stood on the threshold in a coat that smelled of rain and gasoline, a mixture that always calmed her. You're home. His face glowed with a mix of weary care and anxiety. He held a small bag with coffee and a pastry, as if it were a weapon against all storms. Emery, he said, as if afraid the word might shatter. His eyes lingered on Vivian, the woman who, by his expression, existed somewhere between a mother and a threat. I don't understand everything, he added, lowering his gaze to her hands. But you said it was important. Emery smiled, briefly and without promise. She knew she had no good explanations. She herself didn't fully understand. She led Marcus into the living room, where the soft light of the lamp pulled shadows from the corners into halftones. Vivian remained watching, as if conducting invisible notes. I want you to know one thing, Emery said, her words quiet but precise. You're not just present. You're part. Your state will matter. Marcus tensed and, as silly as it sounded, seemed to discover in himself the ability to tremble. I'll do whatever you say, he said. His voice carried not just devotion, but fear. Fear of being used and, simultaneously, fear of losing her if he didn't take the risk. The minutes stretched, and the house seemed to breathe on its own. The coffee grew cold, the pastry untouched. Vivian took a small stone and handed it to Marcus. Hold it in your palm, she said. Don't think. Feel. It's an anchor. If something starts, let it go. I'll see. Marcus smiled tightly and, following the instruction, placed the stone in his palm. At the moment his finger touched the matte surface, Emery was pierced by a sensation, as if a thin string inside her tightened and resonated. It was a feeling of contact, not physical, but deeper, in the layers where emotions took form. She realized this wasn't just a ritual. It was the first gear of a machine someone had started long ago. Hours passed, and the sound of the second arrival spread through the house differently, not as a quick alarm, but as a blade of rationality entering the fabric of magic. Declan Shaw appeared not in a coat, but in a simple sweater and with a folder under his arm. He looked younger than Marcus, but there was a cold resolve in him, the kind found in people of a scientific bent, eyes used to looking not at faces, but at data. I'm sorry I'm late, he said, smiling without much warmth. Vivian sent me the details. I thought this would be more of a conversation, he added, not hiding his irony. But apparently, it's an experiment. His words, innocent on the surface, cut through the thin fabric of trust. Emery noticed how Marcus tensed. Declan placed a meter on the table, a small device resembling a school experiment, and casually nodded toward the notebook. You know how this looks from the outside, he said to Emery. Energy anomalies, resonance. We can measure wave functions. And if we can localize them, we can control them. His eyes were cold, but not without interest. To him, Emery wasn't a person with a soul, but a problem to be solved. This realization brought her both fear and anger, not at him, but at the situation where even the closest could become tools. Vivian began to speak of procedures, contours, and anchors, but a new layer of tension hung in the air. Now in the room were those who loved her and those who wanted to understand her. And between these roles lay a narrow crack. Before the ritual began, they formed a circle, each holding their anchor, a stone, a locket, a device. Emery stood in the center, and the world around her narrowed to the rhythm of breaths. At the moment their palms touched, she felt something chime inside her, not loudly, but distinctly. It was a tone that could only be heard in the presence of others, a tone echoing their fear, love, and curiosity. And the space, which until now had been just a house, turned into an arena where every move would have to be paid for, not necessarily in blood, but in what was most precious to them all: trust, normalcy, what they called being yourself. The silence in the room grew so dense it seemed to have mass. Marcus felt his fingers numb around the cold stone. Declan, how the device in his hands vibrated faintly, responding to a tension he couldn't yet explain. Vivian stood motionless, as if looking not at the people, but through them, to where something else was already beginning. Emery stood in the center of the circle, and for the first time in her life, she felt that the center wasn't a geometric point. It was pressure, power, and responsibility that could be touched with her hands. At first, everything looked deceptively calm. The air grew drier, the light dimmer, as in a room where the lamps were about to burn out. But then the tremors began, inaudible, but visible. The shadows on the walls moved before people could blink. These weren't hallucinations, not reflections. Too clear, too sharp, and too organized. Marcus stepped closer to Emery, but Vivian raised her hand. "Don't come closer. The contour isn't stable yet." "She's shaking," he burst out. "Can't you see?" "I see." Vivian's voice remained even, almost emotionless. "That's not her shaking. That's the echo." Declan, for a second, stopped wearing the face of a rational observer. The device in his hands displayed an amplitude he had never recorded before. He made a few quick notes on the paper. "This is impossible. The readings are off the physical model." "There's no," he hesitated, as if afraid to say the word he usually avoided. "There's no scientific explanation." Vivian smirked. "Then we're getting close." Emery felt the space around her change density. Inside her, too. The fear that had always pulsed beneath the surface now surged upward, splitting in two. One fled outward, the other inward. But at the same time, a third sensation came. Not fear, not pain. Recognition. She knew this feeling. She had experienced it once, many years ago, on a night no one present knew about. And at that moment, everything began. First, sound. Not loud, but distinct. As if someone had run a finger along a string stretched between two worlds. Then, another. And a third. The strings grew louder. "What's happening?" Marcus whispered. But the answer didn't come from Vivian, not from Declan. The answer came from Emery herself. "They're returning," she said. Her voice wasn't her usual. It sounded deeper, more certain, as if another timbre had mixed into it. "I thought I had rid myself of them, but they were just waiting for the moment when there would be witnesses." Marcus paled. "Who are they?" Emery raised her gaze, and her pupils dilated slightly, not from fear, but from the sense that control over her own body was beginning to be shared with someone else. "Those who opened me once. Those who want to finish." The room shuddered. For a second, the light vanished, but when it returned, the shadows on the walls were already moving not in time with the lamp. They moved in time with Emery's breath. Declan quickly raised the device to his eyes, but it suddenly went dark, not from malfunction, but as if someone had turned it off from within. No, this can't be," he whispered. "I've never recorded a field like this. It's as if it's reacting to her emotions." "It is them," Vivian said quietly. "The resonance wasn't random. It's mirror-like. And if you look into the mirror too long, it starts looking back," Emery finished. And at that moment, the floor beneath them cracked slightly. Not collapsed, not split, just cracked, a thin line, as if someone had drawn a needle across the floor. But the sensation was as if it wasn't the board or tile that had cracked, but the boundary separating their world from what was trying to break through. Marcus lunged for her, reaching out his hand. Emery, stop. End this. It's too dangerous. Emery smiled, strangely, inhumanly calm. Marcus, I'm not doing this. This is what I've been hiding. For a second, the room froze. And then the shadows stretched. One of them rose above the floor, higher than any physics allowed. Another stretched from the ceiling, and a third from behind Declan, causing him to recoil and lose his balance. Marcus grabbed Emery's hand, but immediately pulled back. Her skin burned. She's burning up, he shouted. It's not temperature, Vivian corrected. It's resonance. It's amplifying. And if not stopped. She didn't finish, because Emery suddenly raised her head, as if she had heard a call. They're here. And in the last second, the chapter broke off at the most important moment. The shadows suddenly folded into a single silhouette, in human form, but impossibly elongated, and spoke in a voice like the crackle of an old radio. Emery, the time has come. Then the light went out again, and no one had time to understand who exactly remained in the room in the darkness. People. Or not only people. The darkness didn't just cover the room. It switched off reality. Marcus felt his heart pounding somewhere in his throat, and his palms grew clammy, though he couldn't see his own hands or even the silhouettes of the people beside him. In the darkness, there was no volume, no air, only the sensation that they were being watched by someone third, or fourth, or more. The first to return was sound. Emery's hoarse, as if torn, voice. Don't move. Strangely, even in complete darkness, Marcus could see her, not with his eyes, but with something deeper, as if her image had imprinted itself in his mind brighter than light. Then, a quiet crackle. It wasn't a device turning off, not the sound of old wiring. It was a breath. Long, low, as if someone had just woken from a long sleep. The light returned with a jerk. Not from the lamp. It continued to spark, but from some pale, gray glow, like early morning fog inside the room. And in that light, one thing became visible. The silhouette no longer held its shape. What a second ago had looked like an elongated human shadow now wavered, as if it were being built from liquid smoke. Declan stood closest to this being, and for the first time, his rational face twisted in fear. Hearing his own breath, he realized he had stopped hiding his emotions. This can't be a projection, he exhaled. This is a material object, or something that chooses to be material, Vivian interrupted. She said it as if she had long expected the moment when her knowledge would stop sounding like madness and finally become fact. Marcus stepped closer to Emery, but inside he felt as if this step could cost him his life. She wasn't looking at him, at the being, and for the first time, she didn't look frightened. She looked recognizing. You remember them, Vivian whispered. I saw it in your resonance, but didn't want to speak until confirmation. Emery nodded. Slowly, carefully. They came to me when I was 7, at night. Then I thought it was a dream. But she fell silent, as if searching for the word. They don't dream. They return. Always. Marcus felt his stomach clench. Declan, how his scientific models crumbled. Vivian, how the puzzle she had been assembling for years finally found its conclusion. The being tilted its head in a way that, if it had bones, would have been impossible. And it spoke. The voice wasn't human. Rather, it was a chorus of whispers layered over each other. You broke the cycle. Your return is incomplete. We have come for what belongs to us. Emery stepped forward. Nothing in me belongs to you. But the being shifted, as if her words hadn't even touched it. You are the link. You are the entrance. You are the stabilizer. Their world resonates less when you are open. You closed yourself. Now they are dying. Declan frowned, his eyes flashing with thoughts that didn't kill the fear, only pushed it aside. You're saying she's connected to some kind of source? An energy field? A multidimensional structure? The being turned to him, slowly, as if its attention was heavy. The human tries to explain the essence with the language of stones. This is amusing. Marcus instinctively stepped in front of Emery, as if trying to shield her with his body. You won't take her. This isn't up for discussion. The shadow leaned toward him, and the mist around it shimmered, as if laughing. You don't understand. We didn't come for the human. We came for what has awakened. In you three. And the world exploded in white light. The white light didn't disappear immediately. It spread through the room, filling every crack, every corner, as if trying to burn away doubts and fears. Marcus, Declan, and Vivian stood beside Emery, feeling the weight of the moment. This was no longer just a game with the unknown. It was a collision with something that existed parallel to their lives, but had always watched from the shadows. Emery lowered her hands, and the light subsided slightly. But it didn't leave. It remained as an invisible hum, a vibration felt inside the chest, in the fingertips, in the ends of her hair. "We have to," Vivian began, but her voice trembled. "We have to create a new contour, or it will get out of control." Marcus looked at her, trying to grasp the scale of what was happening. Their familiar world, the house, the technology, the walls, had all become a game with a higher level of reality. "Contour," he repeated. "You mean their restraining line?" "Not just a line. A bridge between our worlds. Between her resonance and what they—" Vivian fell silent, searching for words. "Between what they want." Emery stepped into the center of the room, where the vibrations were strongest. She stretched out her hands like a conductor, and the space around her fingers began to shimmer. It seemed as if the light responded to her movement, spreading through the room in pulses, adjusting to the rhythm of her breath. Marcus stepped closer. His palm touched her shoulder, and for a moment, the light responded with a burst of brightness. "It feels us," Emery exhaled. "They feel every touch, every breath." Vivian nodded, her eyes shining in the flickering light. "Then we'll have to work together. Not separately." Declan stepped back, raising the device, which now looked more like a ritual instrument than a scientific tool. He counted frequencies, voltages, amplitudes, but they no longer obeyed the laws of physics. They obeyed Emery. "I'm ready," he said briefly. "But if something goes wrong—" "We won't let it," Vivian interrupted. "Today, we're not alone." And at that moment, the room shuddered, as if the earth around them agreed with her words. Emery slowly closed her eyes. A second later, the light changed again. Now it no longer came from external sources, but seemed to be born within her. Her resonance captured the entire contour of the room. "They're responding to me," Emery whispered. "But they're not in me. They're in us, together." Marcus and Declan instinctively placed their hands on her wrists and shoulders, and the light began to pull stronger. Each of their movements was created in sync, like the breathing of a single organism. Vivian took a step back and raised her hands. In her palms, shimmering lines appeared, invisible to the naked eye, but brightly glowing in the space between them. "The contour is ready. Tune in. 3 points. Center." She pointed to Marcus, Declan, and Emery. "Don't be afraid. This isn't the end. It's the beginning." Emery nodded, and at that moment, something broke through. The space around them expanded, stretching and bending, as if the world itself was taking on a new form. "They're trying to break in," Emery murmured. "But now we hold the bridge." And indeed, the light around them turned into an invisible shield. It felt like powerful, living pressure, which simultaneously protected and pulsed. "Look," Vivian said, pointing to Declan's device. "The synchronization is perfect. Every frequency matches. None is out of bounds." Marcus took a deep breath. For the first time that night, he felt hope. "Did we do it?" he asked. "We began it," Emery answered. "But the path is still long." And at that moment, the shadows from the previous chapter reappeared, but now they weren't threatening. They swayed gently, like reflections on water, as if watching to ensure the bridge remained stable. Emery looked at them and smiled. For the first time, she felt in control of what had once terrified her to death. But the voice in her head still sounded, soft, hoarse, like an echo. "Don't stop. As long as you breathe, we walk with you. But the bridge is your responsibility. Don't break it. Or else." She knew the word, or else, hid more than anyone could understand. And with that thought, the three of them stood in the room where light, darkness, and energy intertwined in a new reality that demanded not only courage, but absolute trust in each other. The room was almost empty. The light, which had just pulsed and lived with them, was now soft and warm, like the sun at dawn. But the darkness hadn't completely gone. It left a thin strip beyond visibility, barely perceptible, but enough to make the heart beat faster. Emery stood in the center, leaning on Marcus, feeling his support like an anchor. Declan held the device, which now looked like a piece of the future where science and the unknown had merged. Vivian quietly observed the contour they had created together, but there was anxiety in her gaze. "We've done the impossible," Emery whispered. "But this isn't the end." Marcus looked at her, trying to find confidence, but saw only determination mixed with fear. "What now?" he asked. "Are they gone?" Emery shook her head. "No, they've gone inside us." "Inside us?" Vivian repeated. "Yes. Every action, every impulse of our consciousness now reflects on the bridge. We hold it, but the bridge is alive. And it watches." Suddenly, the room filled with a quiet whisper, barely audible, as if coming not from space, but from the depths of their own thoughts. "Who among you will be next?" Marcus froze. Declan gripped the device so hard his fingers turned white. Vivian stepped forward, but the voice in her head didn't stop, as if testing their reaction. "This isn't a threat," Emery said. "It's a choice. We built the bridge, but the bridge demands testing. It's asking, who is worthy to be the conduit?" The silence around them became tangible, as if the air was filled with invisible pressure. "So each of us is now part of this," Marcus whispered, the words catching in his throat. "Part of what?" Vivian asked, but no one answered. For a moment, the light around Emery flickered, and she saw the shadows of the past flash in the corners of the room, as if reminding her that their actions had not gone unnoticed. "They're not just watching," Emery said quietly. "They're waiting. Waiting for the moment when one of us shows weakness. Then the bridge will change shape, and not us." Marcus felt a chill down his spine. He understood that control was an illusion. Everything they had created now existed in a parallel reality, where they were just part of a game they didn't fully understand. "And what do we do now?" Vivian asked, but there was fear mixed with curiosity in her voice. "Keep breathing," Emery answered. "And remember one thing. The bridge lives not only in us. It lives around us. And someone out there is watching every step." For a moment, they all heard a sound. Not human, not mechanical, more like a flash of alien consciousness, which said, "You think you're done." But the bridge asks, "Are you ready to see what you never wanted to see?" And then the light went out again, leaving only a faint shimmer on the walls. The room became almost ordinary, but the air was thick, full of possibilities and threats no one could predict. Emery closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and thought, if the bridge demands a choice, who among us will be the one to withstand the next test? And what will happen if we make a mistake? And it was this question that remained unspoken for the reader, leaving room for their own imagination. Who among us is ready to face the truth if the bridge reveals its darkest secrets? The shadows remained. The bridge remained. And beyond the room, someone was already watching, preparing the next move. Or only the beginning.